Hey, good morning. Pete, North Las Vegas, doing another Camaro video on the electrical. This time I'll be talking about the harness, mainly inside the car. And this is the kit that I got from American Autowire. Yeah, I bought this kit about 5 years ago, so I'm just now putting it in the car. The first thing on the harness, and we'll get to why I had to learn how to do all this, but you have to figure out how to get your different style connectors out of the connector housings. And so basically on this harness, I think most of these connectors are referred to as pack cons, which is Packard connector. I think it's short for Packard, and it's an old design. It's been around forever, but works great. So here's the basically the 5 types of connectors I ran across on the harness, and that's these 1/4-inch spring-loaded spades. And how you remove these is you get down inside your connector with a pair of needle nose, and you come in like this, and because they're spring-loaded, that's what releases the locking tab. So that's how you get these out. Okay. This is also a spade. This is a small one, and it went on this connector here. Normally you can see on the open barrel connectors where the crimp and the exposed wire is. On that side you can't see the wire or the crimped area. That's normally where your locking clip is. So I was able to use a 5/64, and I was actually looking for a tool that you could buy that would get in here and not damage these connectors at all. But yeah, they're out there, but this ended up working pretty good. So there are certain orientations where these go in, and on this particular connector, the crimp side, and I'm half blind, the crimp side faces into the connector. So in this case here, it's going to go in like so, from the back side facing in. Okay, so if I want to release this connector, is I come in with my screwdriver on the tab side and force that tab down, and you're going to smash the tab, and then pull your screwdriver back out, because if you try to pull the wire out while your screwdriver is still in there, a lot of times it won't come out. So you're going to stick your screwdriver in here, and you're going to smash that tab flat, and then that allows you to get the wire out. So I've already sprung that back into position, so we'll just put this back in the connector. Okay, so we're in there now. Like I said, you're going to come in on the wire side of the connector, force your screwdriver in there, you're going to smash that tab down, and then you're going to pull your screwdriver back out. And I didn't get it far enough in, so we'll try this one more time. Sorry about the camera work, but anyway. Okay, there we go. Now I felt it move, but still trying to get it all the way out with your screwdriver still in here, it makes it kind of hard. So I already know I have the tab smashed down. So now you can see the tab has been flattened enough to get it back out. So anyway, that's how this particular style works. And Dewey went right there. Okay, so far we've got that style, we got this style here covered, and same thing on the female side. Same style right here. Okay, now these two look very similar, but they're not the same. Okay, this one here on the green wire has one locking tab. This right here is just a locating pin that allows this connector to go in one direction on the plastic housing, and this is your actual locking tab right here. So you got to kind of figure out, as you're looking at the connector, which side this is going to be on when you come in with your screwdriver to release that tab. And then this one here, this style here is very, very similar, like I said, but it has 2 locking tabs. One here and one here. So you're going to have to come in twice on either side of this connector to release it. So anyway, that's your basic connector styles on this harness. So why did we cover all that? Okay, now we're going to get into a little bit of a rant. This is an American Autowire kit, as I said at the beginning of the video, and this thing was an absolute bird's nest. It was like a French braid. If you look at the catalog pictures and you look at all these different sites, whether it's Classic Auto, Summit Racing, wherever you're going to buy your wiring kit from, they show the kit all laid out, and all the wires are perfectly laid out in parallel, and everything is separated and bundled up really nice in their picture. Well, the only analogy I can make is it's kind of like McDonald's, Burger King, or Carl's Jr. You see these big juicy cheeseburgers on TV on their commercials, and then you go through their drive-thru, you open the bag, and not exactly like the picture showed it. Okay, so anyway, that's where we were at. So now I'm going to talk about some of the issues I had with the harness and why I ended up having to take quite a few of these connectors apart. Was because, like I said, they had these wires intertwined and braided, and it was just a mess. So when this was up inside the car, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to route the wires the way I wanted to because it was so twisted up. So I don't know who did my kit, my harness. If you've bought from American Autowire and you got one that was all laid out really nice in the box, that's great, but that's not the way mine was. So anyway, we'll start talking about the harness itself and what I'm going to use where and why and what I got rid of. Matter of fact, let's just talk about what I got rid of first. Okay, so the first thing I removed from the harness was this dash wiring. And this was actually part of the harness. And this is oil pressure, water temp, tachometer, all your dash indications. And so I removed that from the harness, and that wire is kind of spread out in different places. So here's some of that wire, and there's some more over here. So anyway, this was part of the harness. You plug this into the harness. This end of the connector was going to go to the dash after you wired this connector in to all these wires. Now, the reason they left this disconnected and had view wired up is this is the idiot light version dash. So that dictates that this be wired up a certain way. And if you have gauges, then it's going to be wired up slightly different. Now, most of the pinout's the same, but there are some changes. So depending on which instrument cluster you have for OEM stock determines how this gets wired up to the harness wiring. Because I'm using Dakota Digital, I got rid of this, I got rid of this, and this part here that plugs into the back of the dash, none of this is going to be used. All my inputs are going to the Dakota Digital control box and then to their instrument cluster. So this is the first thing I got rid of. Okay, so on the wiring harness, here's my tachometer. These are the oil pressure and water temp, which I will not be using. These are going to be spare wires. Dakota Digital has their own harness for water and oil pressure, which I will be using. This is for dash lights. This one was hooked up to the instruments, which I will not be using. Dakota Digital powers their own instrument panel without the use of the dash wiring, but I've got some extra dash wiring here. This here is radio power, clock battery, and I'm going to be using this on the Dakota instruments for constant power. And Dakota control box requires constant power for keep alive voltage and settings. So instead of running this to a clock in the car, I'm going to use this for Dakota Digital. That's just a ground wire. Now here's another what's called radio battery wire, and this can go to the radio. This is for the lighting on the radio, radio power 10 and radio ground. But this particular wire here, radio battery, is it goes to the same place as the clock wire on the fuse block. It's pigtail at the fuse block, so these are basically the same wire. So one's going to go for Dakota Digital, like I said, constant power, and the other one, if I put a fancy radio in that also requires some keep alive voltage for settings or whatever, then I'll be using this. Now if I just go old school on the radio and I don't have a bunch of settings I got to worry about keeping alive, then we won't use this. All we're going to use is basically power and ground to the radio and possibly a dash light. Okay, so that's those wires. This here plugs into the engine compartment and goes down to the tramic, and this is your speed. This will also plug into the Dakota Digital control module. And this one here is high beam indication on the Dakota instruments, and this is the gas gauge. Now I was kind of wondering how I was going to wire my parking brake and my emergency brake switch into Dakota Digital. It's basically these devices, all they do is provide a ground. So on the American Autowire kit, they took those two brown wires, and here's my brake failure indicator on a proportioning valve. So this particular brown wire here and my parking switch brown wire at the fuse are tied together. So if I leave the parking brake on, I'll get a light on the Dakota Digital saying that the brake is on, or if I get a brake failure, I'll get a light, because both these brown wires go to the same place on the fuse block. So anyway, I think we already talked about this one, oil and whatever. Now for my turn signals, they kind of gave me, these are going to Dakota for left and right turn signals, but there wasn't enough wire in the kit to go directly over, so I'm going to have to butt splice these together and then hook that up to Dakota Digital. Okay, so safety neutral switch. I'm going to hook that up. A lot of people don't care about it, but I don't know who's going to be driving my car, so I thought it would be a good idea to have the safety neutral. Now this is the only mistake that I found on the harness. This wiring labeling, and I mentioned this in another video, I don't know if you can see it, it says neutral safety switch. This is not the switch wire. This is the solenoid wire, and that goes right over here and out through the firewall down to the starter solenoid. So this has been mislabeled. And then they did the same thing over here. This they're calling the starter solenoid, but it actually goes to the ignition switch. So these wires, the labeling is swapped around. The wires are in the correct place, and as long as you know that they're not labeled right, you'll be fine. All right, let me catch my breath here, and we'll get moving on the rest of it. Dakota Digital module also has two ways to dim the instrument lights, and you can send a park wire over to the Dakota Digital dim connector, and that will dim your instrument panel on a preset, meaning you decide how much you want to dim it and program it. Or you can hook up a separate potentiometer that goes to ground, and then you can adjust the brightness of the instrument cluster all you want. So anyway, I'm going to run this over to Dakota Digital, but I'm probably not going to use it. I'm just going to dead end it the same way as the oil and water temp. And I bought the dim switch, so I'll probably be using that, but I'm just going to run this over there anyway, just because I can. It's a safety neutral wiring that's mislabeled. Like I said, the wires go to the right place, they're just labeled wrong. The other thing that was kind of odd was this is the headlight switch connector right here. This is the windshield washer, and these are the grounds. And they gave me like 5 feet. 5 feet of wiring. And the dash probably sits right about here. So they gave me like an extra 2 feet of wiring, and I don't know what to do with it. So I thought about maybe ordering some new connectors from them and trimming this harness back about halfway. And I just said no, I'll coil it up and hide the extra wire somewhere. But man, they gave me a lot of wire for the headlight switch. So I'm not sure why, but whatever. Okay, so courtesy lights. That's these orange and white wires. These were an absolute kludge. These things were all intertwined with all the other wiring, and you can see how it's not a clean install to begin with. This would have been a good opportunity, I think, for American Autowire to really clean up the harness. They could have set all the connection points up and the jumper ring and the series connections and doubling up of wires. Seems to me they could have easily done that somewhere either inside the fuse block or done it just outside and run separate pairs of wires to each courtesy light, whether it's the dome light or the kick panel lights or whatever. And they could have cleaned this up. And this was probably one of the main issues with this harness as to why I had to take it all apart, because they just had this completely jacked up. And if you think it looks a little bit kludged up right now, you should have seen it before. Okay, so courtesy lights, and the other area that in my opinion they could have done a lot better is the grounding wires. And these grounding wires are all kind of jumpered around. Here's another separate ground, jumpered, ground to the windshield washer. Where's my radio wires? All right, radio. Oh, here's the radio wires. They had the radio jumper extra ground. I'm going to use that as an extra ground. So I mean, between the courtesy wiring and the grounds, they just, like I said, I know I'm kind of repeating myself, just bird's nest, which is why I had to take this harness apart, and just to get the wires run in a reasonable, makes sense kind of fashion compared to how I got it in the box. And like I said, maybe this was just my kit. Whoever wired my kit up was having a bad day. I don't know. But anyway, that's why I ended up having to take some of the connectors apart. Okay, so now we'll go over all the stuff that I removed and won't be using. So we already talked about this dash harness that I removed, and I'm not going to be using that. So all that got removed. This was part of the cigarette lighter wiring, and I'll find the connector. Here's a cigarette lighter. Chances are high nobody's going to be smoking in the car, or if they do, they're going to have to use their own lighter. Well, they're just not going to smoke in the car. So anyway, I removed the cigarette lighter from the harness, and then I also took out the fuse, because I pulled the connector out of the back of the fuse box that fed the lighter. So let's see if we can find that. Okay, here's the lighter right here. You can see you can see one of the pins is gone. So I took that out of the back of the fuse box, and that's this one right here. Okay, so that's the lighter. A generator light, old school generator light. I removed that wiring, and I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but this brown wire has a white stripe on it, and the other brown wire is a little bit heavier gauge. So this dotted line right here and this connection point right here, that's where this connector is, and that went inside the fuse block. So this wire here with the white stripe I removed, and then where it's connected, it runs up here to the generator light. So I got rid of that. Now I left enough of the brown and white stripe wire at the fuse block in case someday I change my mind or somebody wants to run an old school, and here it is. I just dead-ended it at the fuse block. So generator light gone. Okay, so I'm using vintage air AC and heat, so I didn't need the heater switch, so that's all this wiring. So I got rid of this. And this is the resistor wiring here. That's these 3 wires. And then on the other side we have the brown and the orange, which I removed out of the fuse block. So I removed those orange wires and the brown wire, and then I pulled the fuse out, and that's, you can see one of the connectors is missing and the fuse is out of that. So because I'm running vintage air conditioning and heating, don't need that. Once again, because I'm running Dakota Digital, the way they show this on the drawing here, this is basically the connector, and this is the part that I cut out of the harness. And this part here was going up to the instrument panel. The pink wire provided power to the instruments. The gray wire was for dash lights. The brown wire was for parking lights, and the black was the ground. So I know, once again, because I'm running Dakota Digital, I don't need any of that. So we pulled that out of the harness. That keep alive voltage I was telling you about, the constant power input for Dakota Digital, and that was just on the end of this wire here, and they just put a connector on it, and this is just going to go directly into Dakota Digital, so don't need that. So they gave us a connector for the speed, and I don't need that. One end would go down to the Tremec, and this other end was tied to this. So anyway, we'll be coming from the Tremec transmission and tying into this, so don't need that. This is the heater AC stock original control panel lamp. That's what lights it up. This is one of those grounds from hell that was just daisy chained and pigtailed everywhere. Then you have your gray lighting wire. So because Vintage Air supplies their own power to their own control panel, I didn't need separate power from the fuse box, so we got rid of that. Okay, so this is the glove box wiring right here. I don't want anybody to see my gun in the glove box. Got rid of that. Brown wire I was showing you earlier inside the car for the generator light. I also removed the firewall side alternator wire. You can see where it says alternator, and the firewall side heat air, because I don't need this anymore. So that was this brown wire here that plugged into the firewall connector. So I removed that. And then the heater, as soon as I figure out where it's at, right here. So that's the orange wire that went to the fuse block for the heater, which I won't be using either, because once again, running vintage air conditioning and heating, so I don't need that. So that is what I took out of this harness to wire up the car the way I want to do it. All right, so Pete, North Las Vegas, over and out. Well, one other thing. Now the hard part. Putting that back in the car, routing all the wiring, figuring out the best place, and then wrapping it up and zip tying it and getting it all nice and pretty. Anyway, hope this helps somebody. Pete, North Las Vegas, over and out.